right, we are back with Mark Cecchini again. Got the name right, had to ask again. But if you did not check out the earlier episode we did together on planning for IPOs, liquidity events, etc., definitely go check it out. But we got Mark again here today to talk a little bit about financial planning for people in their 30s to 50s. So this is something that both of us specialize in, and I think financial planning is vastly different in different stages, right? Like if you're post college is very different than now you're in your highest income earning years in your 30s and 50s, which is different if you're an employee versus a business owner, which is different than retirees. So, Mark, this was a topic you were excited to talk about. Like when you think about planning for people in their 30s to 50s and how it's different, like what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this because I think it's a passion of mine, and candidly, I'm in that sort of age bracket, and so I'm thinking about all these same things personally, which makes it a lot of fun to compare and contrast notes with clients and trade baby pictures and stuff like that. But I think for me, it's just an insane period of life, right? You're probably making the best money you've made so far. Maybe you're not in your like peak earning years yet, which for some people come in their sort of 40 to 60 range, depending on what career you're in. But you're probably making pretty good money for where you are in life, and definitely more than you were making in your 20s. So that comes with a lot of things, right? Cash flow issues, lifestyle creep, which I know there's some debate around lifestyle creep, tax implications, right? You're starting families. You might have your first or second child in that time period. You're figuring out housing, right, which I think we're going to talk about, and just getting that housing decision right is critical, especially right now with rates where they are. And just biting off too much house is not a good decision for most people and can hamstring a lot of their other financial goals. You're also dealing with career things, right? Whether it's, hey, my company's going to have a liquidity event for the first time, or maybe I have clients who have multiple companies that either they've worked for or work for now that have liquidity events in the next couple of years, right? So not just the one you work for, but companies you may have already worked for that you still have equity in. You also might be deciding to leave or join companies, right? So all those checklists that we think about when somebody leaves a job, and you might be caring for older parents, maybe in their 70s, maybe 80s. So
That's a
there's
good
some
point.
things there depending on how financially stable they are, maybe health issues. And then figuring out estate insurance and all those other things to protect your children is just so critical, right? There's so many things to do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about in here that we need to get right. One point that I've not talked about is really actually like that you brought up is like you're kind of the sandwich generation time. Like I have a few clients who are stuck in kids are like in private school and they're paying for their parents' care. And
Yep.
so you're paying like $10,000 to $20,000 a month just to help take care of two different sides of it. And I think when we think about financial planning, you have to think about all the things that you're gonna have to take care of now in the midterm and the long term, right? Because I'll see people, they'll go buy a really big house, for example, and they won't think about, okay, hey, in 4 years, my kid's gonna have to go to private school here. And then 5 years, I'm gonna have to take care of my parents and pay for their expenses. And all of a sudden they get to a point, they're like, oh my gosh, we're operating at a deficit. And my kids have 12 years of school. My parents are in their mid 70s. That could be 2 years, it could be 15 years. And you can get yourself stuck in this spot where like you get really behind financially because you can't make any progress for a long period of time, all in areas that you could have better planned for.
Totally. Like you mentioned things to get right. I think where you live is one, just location period, right? It comes with, as financial planners, we think of like, oh, state tax rates and what's more competitive and things like that. And I think some of my clients come to me and are like, should I move to Texas or Florida before this liquidity event? I'm like, wait, let's hold up a second. Like, is this right for your life, or is this just something you want to do to avoid the California 13.3 or 14.4? So I think that thing is a really important one. It's obviously what house to buy or not buy, or condo to buy or not buy. And I think the education thing is huge too. I always start off a lot of new client conversations with like, what does success look like for your children's education, right? Is it you paying for everything, including K through 12 and undergrad and then business school and law school or doctorate or whatever it is, and they have no student debt? Is it a compromise of the two, or is it, hey, they're on the hook for everything because I was on the hook for everything? And I think a lot of our past experience dictates how we feel about that conversation.
That one
Or,
especially, because and then you find most couples don't have the same. So then they're kind of stuck
yeah.
in like, I had the skin in the game and it was really good for me, and they're like, yeah, but I didn't and it was really good for me. Because I mean, honestly, we're both working with mostly very successful people, and so whatever way they went, they still ended up being okay. And I think there's merit into both. Like some kids,
Yeah.
if they go to a really expensive school, they don't care, et cetera. That's terrible for them. And then there's other kids who like I think about it, like my grandma paid for my college, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me because it allowed me to take kind of the step to work with Justin to start my own business, and my fixed expenses were so low because I wasn't carrying so much student debt. And like I still worked hard, it put me in a spot
Yeah.
versus somebody else maybe, or me, if I would have had 200,000 of student loans, would I have ever gotten to where I would? Because I knew that my burn, I couldn't take that risk.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it also goes to the concept of like delayed gratification versus enjoying your life right now. Maybe moving on from the education piece, just I think a lot of my clients they really get stuck in this situation of like, I'm making really good money. My kids are in their, early years and they're still really like into like spending time with mom and dad before they get older and start to think we're weird. And so I want to like take vacations and I want to buy the beach house or the mountain house or wherever this, whatever those things take, or I want to take a sabbatical, right? Maybe I'm expecting my first or second child and we're going to stack the paternity and maternity, but maybe we extend that, take the full year off. Like all those things are really tough because they're just different than our parents' generation, right? Our parents' generation did not think this way. I think in many cases, I'm sure there were people that took sabbaticals and took time off and spent money on good vacations and bought second and third homes. But I think the concept of traditional retirement is different for us, right? So it's like, hey, we know we have to save for the long term, but I don't know if I want to retire at 60 or even 65, maybe even 70, right? We don't know what work looks like in 10 years, let alone in 40 years. So it's tough to envision, but we want to enjoy wealth now, right? Because we've seen how fleeting life can be, and you're not guaranteed tomorrow. So I want to enjoy my life now and my family to enjoy the fruits of my really hard work while still saving for the future. So there's really a tough, thing to tangle with when you're in your 30s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah, and this is another like experience one because for a lot of people it was okay. My parents saw like their parents was kind of more the military family. A lot of them had to go in the military. They had to work really, really hard to basically provide an okay life. So then the next generation was like, I just need to make some more money than my family because if we're middle class and I can provide everything, then we're good. And then our generation said, we saw a lot of people, the families above us, middle class, they worked hard, they didn't really have freedom, they didn't really get to be around their kids as much. And so now I want good money plus freedom. And so I think we are part of this generation where, I think if you come from the more like I'm an immigrant or like from very low wealth, then there's a little different. They're more on like higher income, more on like higher savings rates, less debt, et cetera. If you come from the, hey, my family did pretty well, they're more about like spending and experiences and freedom. And I think you can really do both. Like I think a lot of the clients I work with, what they want to plan for is spend time and enjoy with kids, hit a work optional age at a decent time, young when they can still travel and still work but reduce income. And like if you can get to like 55 and all you have to do is make your expenses, it creates a very different life than I want to retire at 55 because you need almost like half the value because getting 1 decade of compounding without touching that portfolio can open up so much. Like I'm doing a plan for a client now that's like they would have to invest like max out every retirement account, et cetera, $250K a year to taxable. Or if they do, then they're both entrepreneurs, make their expenses from 55 to 63, they would need to do 100,000 to a taxable account. Wow. So that opens up now a lake house that they want, more travel, et cetera, just to cover those expenses. Like a lot of people are going to pick better life today, more expenses, more travel, things you want to do, and then reduced roll, but enough to just cover expenses.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most fun parts for me, I'm sure it is for you, is just having that exploratory conversation with people in the beginning. Because I think, if you ask most people, they're like, yeah, I want to, do really well in my career. I want to have enough money so I don't have to worry about money. I want to live well, be comfortable, go on trips, maybe buy a second vacation home in the mountains or at the beach or wherever you want to live. But I don't think anyone's really asked them, or they haven't talked about it definitely with each other in terms of like actual conversation about goals. Is like, what do you want out of life, right? And so I've had people say like, oh, we actually want to buy this type of house at this beach because our parents often go to that beach vacation, or we've always, wanted to own a condo at, the shore in Jersey or Delaware, wherever it is. I'm biased. I like Delaware. My wife and I's family go there. But, they actually have to put numbers to it and time frames, or I want to join that country club, right? Because I really love golf. Golf is like my thing, and I think the kids would love the pool. And so we have to figure out like what's the buy-in for that country club and what's the annual dues. And if that's your thing, like great, we have to plan for that. And then you layer on the education things and the housing. It's a lot. Like you cannot do these things in a vacuum. And I think no one has been prompted a lot of times before with these questions. I'll just like for the housing thing, I'll just pause there for a second because I think I'm pretty passionate about this. My wife and I decided to get a bigger house, after we rented, just because the area we live in is not somewhere we're going to have to spend $2 million to get a big house. So we're lucky in that respect. But also, we didn't want to have to move several times, and so we were okay with, if our budget was X, we were okay with like, just under X in terms of like the max spend. Because I think it's important to us to have the space and have a bunch of kids and not have to move around. That was our decision though. That's how we felt. Versus somebody else might be like, you know what, with rates where they are, I'm just good renting for right now, right? I'm really comfortable with that. I'm where I want to be in terms of like the city I want to work in, and my parents are X, Y, and Z, place from us. But you really have to get that decision right too, because it dictates a lot of your cash flow.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of good things there. As it relates to housing, I think it really is like a values decision. Like you talk about this all the time on Twitter. Like you post you're hosting people. Like, I have a lot of clients who are the same way. They love to host people. Like they want to spend the most time at their house. They want to bring people there. They want to have the house like the kids that come back to, but also that like friends come over to.
Yep.
And so they'd much rather spend more than elsewhere. And so that was the right values-based decision for you.
Yep.
There's other people who they want to spend a lot on cars and travel and clothes and things like that. And so like being able to reduce their housing expense is better for them.
Yeah.
And so it really does come down to like, hey, what's the rule of thumb? And some people will say don't spend more than 35% of your gross income. Some people say don't spend more than 20%. And that's all housing costs included, right? Like the lower it is, the more extra you have, the more you can invest, the more you can get ahead, the more you can spend. But that doesn't always mean it's the right decision. Certain people, like if you are a steady career person where like every year you go up 3 to 5% is very different than you and I, right? Like we know, hey, if we take on 10 clients a year, you can make 30% more in 1 year. And because it's repeatedly been done, you can kind of make some decisions because we're also not concentrated in like 3 clients. If you're, hey, I'm a business owner and I have 3 clients and I lose one and I could lose 30% of my income, that's a big risk. Or if you're, a tenured professor versus, somebody in tech who could easily lose their income, like you can make different spending decisions based on what you think income is this year, next year, et cetera. And sometimes, the folks we work with, equity comp, et cetera, you need to view cash, bonus, RSUs, all as total comp for the year, minus taxes. Now let's look at spending decisions. Look at house, look at car, look at country club, look at, adding the lake house. When we build all of that in, what does it look like? Because I find a lot of people in those situations, they don't count on RSUs. But you might make $2 million a year with $1 million in RSUs. That is a cash. Like that, you can view spending decisions based on that. And I think that's something a lot of times is missed.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the other thing I would point out is on the investment side, right? I think there's so much chatter online about how you should just buy the total stock market index or buy the S&P. And again, I'm just as big a fan of the S&P 500 as the next person for obvious reasons, right? Low cost exposure to an index that's been crushing it for over a decade, going way back over multiple decades. But I think when you talk about all these things that we just talked about, like your whole portfolio cannot be invested in the S&P 500. Why? Because we've seen the S&P drop 40%, right? In 18 months, we've seen these periods of volatility, and also you want these pockets of liquidity, whether it be cash or muni bonds or something that's very high yielding and safer, so that when these things come up, like your cash flow is not stagnant. You're going to need chunks of capital. You don't want to have to sell your S&P 500 fund or whatever your exposure is to the S&P 500 or ACWI. If you're in a custom index, you don't want to liquidate that when you need a lot of money in the short term. Why? Because you have capital gain implications within those funds. You likely have a double hit from taking the money out, so you're reducing your exposure to equities, and also you're paying capital gains, and so it's kind of this double-edged sword. So you need those pockets of other things, and you also just want things that zig when everything else zags, right? You don't want this perfectly correlated portfolio that's all U.S. large growth that may not continue for the next year.
And people forget, like when you go back over the last 100 years, large cap growth is not the number one performing asset class. It's actually, I'm pretty sure, international, emerging markets, and mid cap all performed better over the last 100 years. And then people are like, well, yeah, but it didn't over the last 15. Well, then would you only want to own the asset class that outperformed everything else when historically it doesn't? Probably not. I think the other part about with who we work with is because of the age and income, they have the ability to take way more risk, right? If you're 60 and you're going into retirement, all the S&P 500, all equities, et cetera, might work if you're very wealthy and
Yeah.
dividends and social security and RMDs cover everything. But for most people, no. But for our clients, right, like this 10% concentrated position rule, I actually don't think is true at all. Like I have clients that are 30, 40, 50. I mean, we obviously have business owners who are 98% correlated into the business they have. There is risk there, but you can take more risk the younger you are because it's just not as devastating as, hey, I'm all in Tesla at 70 years old, and then Tesla drops, 60% in a year. That's a very big difference than, hey, I'm 50% Tesla at 30 and I can weather the downturns because my income is kind of what provides my life, not my portfolio.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives you so much staying power when you have that plan figured out and you have the income to support. Because these go. My favorite thing in planning is like everything demands dollars, right? There's whether it's insurance need or estate planning or gifting. That gifting is one thing we haven't talked about, which I want to talk about for a second. But every one of these goals takes dollars away from something else, and so you cannot do it in a vacuum. Again, I keep beating that dead horse, or beating that drum. I think you have to have it all fit together, and you have to be willing to trade off, right? Different things. If you're wealthy enough to do everything, that's great. We have a few clients in that camp, but I think the other thing is gifting. I've been so inspired with my clients in terms of how charitable they are, both with actual like 501c3 giving, whether it's their old universities or to local community efforts or more national based charities, but also like family gifting, right?
Yep.
And friend gifting and supporting friends' businesses and angel investments. And obviously those aren't charitable. They're more like, hey, I want to support my friends and colleagues and former colleagues in their ventures. But I just think it's awesome to be able to see people who are in their, in the millennial and maybe Gen X demographic that have often been called selfish or, hey, they're just in it to like make the next buck and spend as much money and buy nice things. It's like, I don't see that at all. I see the exact opposite, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
And gifting is like, especially with the people we're working with, gifting is so valuable because one, you get to even just use yearly gifting, you get to get money out really early. So the growth for your kids or parents or whoever beneficiary is really, really impactful. I have some clients who are doing really cool things like, their kids are 22 and they're basically using the yearly gifting to have them do the mega backdoor Roth or
Yeah.
enough to do their backdoor Roth IRAs or, there's just a lot of cool things you can do. Like imagine if your kid starts in tech at 23 and from 23 to 30, you help them max their mega backdoor and their Roth IRA, right? Like just right there, you're going to help them get in, $400,000 of Roth money. They could never get another dollar again, and they're basically set up for life. So I think there's just a lot of cool things. The other thing to remember is like you can do unlimited to school and health costs, so you can still gift outside of that. But I think you're right. Gifting is one, help family, two, potentially help friends, things like that. But three, charity. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people, I think there's people who don't start that way, but once you get pretty wealthy, like most people end up being like, that's something I want to get into more. And, there's so much you can do with private stock, your company before you sell, donor advised funds, CRTs. Like there's just a lot of good moves you can make that benefit you financially. And I know you're the same. We work with a lot of California clients.
Yep.
In California with low basis stock, I mean, you can basically give for every dollar you give, it costs you like 20 to 30 cents. And then
Yep.
you can grow it and almost outpass what that cost was to you.
100%. Yeah. It gets me excited because I think like the average person, if you talk to them online, especially, they might be like, well, I have this, and this set up at Vanguard and Wealthfront. And, I know my company equity pretty well. I know what I spend and I think I'm good. It's like, you might be, right? Like I'm not saying that you need an advisor, but you probably forgot about 12 things, right off the bat that I can think of. And you have kids, add another few things. I know when I turned 30 and definitely when I had my first child a year ago, I finally got serious about things that I just wasn't thinking about before, right? And I don't have an advisor. I probably should in the next couple of years hire somebody just to get my wife and I and, get us together and have somebody else to bounce ideas off of. But, just the estate planning alone, it's the number one thing that people do not have when they come to me. And these are brilliant people, right? These are not dumb people that don't know what they're doing. They just neglect things like insurance, estate planning, opening the 529, funding the trust if they have one already. These are just things that people just don't think about, and it's through no fault of their own. It's just, in some cases, it's inertia, and in some cases, it's just not having the time.
And then there's just the certain things that are the least fun to do. Rollovers, estate planning,
It's
funding,
administrative.
insurance changes, beneficiaries, like all of that is so boring that people are like, I barely have any free time between kids and work. Like the last thing I'm going to do is be like, great, Friday night, I'm carving out, retitling all of my accounts. And we know that. So we remind you every single time, ahead of the meeting, after the meeting. And eventually 2 years from now, you're going to have everything done, and otherwise you never would have.
Totally.
Last part, I think, just hit on the last couple of minutes, is like the biggest decisions to get right. And for me, like, I think the most important decision people want to get right in their 30s and 50s is what your investment rate is. Because I think, you can sit here and say, okay, in 30 years, you want to retire and spend this much. This is what you need to save per year. But the issue is that life's going to change way too much for that to be good. So I always start with a percentage of your income, because you talk about lifestyle inflation, you talk about a lot of things there. If you start with an investment rate in mind and make spending decisions from there, I like to use 20%. If you start with 20% investment rate, spend the rest, and then if you still have left over, invest more. I think that one simple trick sets people up so well financially.
I completely agree. I think it's savings rate. I think it's where to live, and within where to live geographically, like what house and work or condo or apartment you're living in. I think it's family planning. I mean, I think some people rush into kids without really thinking it through. And, again, I think it works out for people in the end, but I think financial planning wise, you need to be aware of what a kid brings, right? Whether it's, just reprioritization of time and energy, whether it's the cost of, monthly cost of having a child and formula and all these other things that, I'm finding out now are very expensive, little snacks and things like that, and pouches, but also the protecting them, right? Whether it's college funding or insurance and life insurance, estate planning, even employee benefits, right? Like getting that right is critical, particularly if you have dependents. It's just something that people don't take seriously. They kind of do the open enrollment, check the box, and move on. And then I think the career thing, I know you and I both talk a lot about online, is your rate of return on your investments does not matter if your income does not grow, right? Like it's almost irrelevant. If you crush your income growth and your career growth, whether it's starting your own business, working at the right company, or just joining a rocket ship, like your financial planning is going to take care of itself, right? Because that's one of the number one factors.
Yeah, people spend so much on like getting the extra little bit of return, but like if you're investing 100K a year versus 10, the difference in return, when I talk to my clients all the time, when you've won the income game and the investment rate game, returns are just like, we just need good returns. You don't need above average returns. And when you're swinging for above average returns is typically when you end up like really hurting yourself. You can take market returns, a little concentration in your business, the company you're at, et cetera, and be totally fine. And I think, you hit on a lot of good ones there. I think obviously your partner, your spouse is a really important financial one. Your career is obviously a really big one. I also think like what you do inside of your career. So for like the two of us, right, like you can scale, be really big team. You can decide, hey, I actually want to be smaller and I want to have more time with family. You could go James Knoll route and be like, I want to build a massive firm that I sell. And, a lot of times in that you actually have less income throughout, but higher exit. I have a lot of business owners, service-based business versus tech firm, like how you build and what you can do is different. But I really think at the end of the day, it's career, house, where you live, investment rate. Like those are things that most of them are pretty controllable and things that you want to get right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think having fun too. I think that's the one overarching thing is just, it's really fun to work with this demographic because they're having fun, right? Like they're working their butts off at work. It's painful. It's stressful, especially if they have kids on top of everything and their spouse is also working. It's just, you feel like you can't breathe, but also they are spending time to have fun and travel and do things around the house and do home projects and send their kids to the coolest camps in the summer and give to charity and give to family members. So I'm inspired by this group every day, and I think it's just a fun time to be in this sort of demographic.
Yeah, it's a great group to work with. Mark, before we head out, best places to follow and engage with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Best place is probably Twitter and LinkedIn. So Twitter or X, I'm at Mark Cecchini, MarkCecchini, and then LinkedIn. Just find my name. I'll plug my little project I'm working on. Hopefully by the end of this month, I'll have my own website, markcecchini.com. So if you go there now, it's kind of like, hey, launching soon, and you can put in your email address.
All right. Love it. Mark, man, really appreciate the time. Everybody, thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate and subscribe and check Mark out on social. All right. See you next week.
Thanks, Thomas.